they weren't supposed to open the basement. Not because it was sealed or protected or even hidden. No, it was something far older than locks or law. It was fear, generational, instinctual, the kind passed through glances and silences, the kind you feel in your spine when something's wrong but unseen. But in March of 1949, the basement beneath 47 Waverly Street was opened, and what lay behind that door was not simply a room. It was a ritual, a confession, a timeline, broken and bleeding. Inside, under low-hung light bulbs, authorities found the remains of 17 people, every skeleton laid carefully in its own place, each of them wearing a watch handmade, delicate, impossibly intricate, no two the same. And every single one was still ticking. This wasn't a crime scene, it was a machine. And at its center had lived one man, Gregory Shaw. To the neighbors, he was just a quiet old soul who never left his home. They remembered the tick-tick-tick of gears echoing through the floorboards, the closed curtains, the packages delivered and never taken out. He spoke to no one. No family, no visitors, no friends. But he built. Every single day for 22 years, Gregory Shaw descended into that basement and emerged only for necessities. He told the landlord he was a horologist, a master watchmaker, that he was repairing time itself. They laughed. Now, no one's laughing. Because what Gregory Shaw left behind was not just murder, it was a map, a design. Each of the 17 watches bore symbols never seen in any human calendar. The inner mechanisms operated on a timing system completely disconnected from Greenwich Mean Time, the sun, or atomic regulation. One physicist described them as tuned to something older than time. There was no blood at the scene, no signs of torture, only silence and the ticking. The case was buried under bureaucracy within weeks. Files vanished, reports sealed, official cause of death unknown. But unofficially, a few quiet men in long coats whispered something else. Gregory Shaw didn't kill those people. He collected them. For what? We're about to descend into that rabbit hole, own tick at a time. Don't blink, don't breathe. Because when you hear what I'm about to show you, you may never look at a clock the same way again. You've been lied to about time. Not just how we measure it, but what it really is, what it does, what it hides. Because the deeper you go, the more you'll see. Time isn't linear, it isn't stable. It bends under belief, under blood, under will. And some men like Gregory Shaw didn't age, they anchor. That basement was never just his workspace. It was a sanctum, a vault. Every piece of wood, every brick in the wall was carved with inscriptions ancient, meticulous, arranged in concentric circles. The FBI brought in a team of linguistic experts. Half of them walked out. One of them suffered a mental break and was institutionalized for the rest of his life. The symbols weren't language in any modern sense. They were resonance marks, tools of alignment. Think of them like tuning forks for reality itself. And each skeleton found in that basement? They weren't just victims. They were nodes, placed in precise positions, aligned by age, birth date, and according to one suppressed file soul frequency, a term the official report never dared to define. Gregory's journal's what fragments remained unburned spoke of the hour of hollow waking, a phrase he repeated again and again. When the watches chime in harmony, the sleeper stirs. Who or what the sleeper was is still unknown. But here's what we do know. Each of the 17 watches was designed to operate in silence until one date. December 22, 1949. On that night, neighbors reported a strange humming sound emanating from the house. Windows glowed faintly, though no lights were on. A local boy who peered through the cracks claimed he saw shadows moving backward, as if the room was rewinding. 3 days later, Gregory Shaw was dead. No signs of struggle. No injury, no poison, just gone. Like a battery drained. And every watch, frozen at exactly 3:33 a.m., all except one. It's still ticking. Unclaimed. Unfound. And here's the thing they'll never print. Gregory wasn't just building watches. He was building a gate. And the moment that last watch stops ticking, Someone or something is going to step through it. Still want to know more? Then keep listening. Because in the next section, we're going to uncover what Gregory Shaw found in 1927 that turned a simple watchmaker into a ritual engineer. 1927 West Berlin, that's where it began. Gregory Shaw, then only 22 years old, was apprenticing under a forgotten craftsman named Carl Bernstein, officially a horologist, unofficially something far darker. Bernstein was rumored to be part of a hidden sect, the Urkreis, or Circle of the Hour. They didn't believe time was a concept, they believed it was a structure, a fortress of invisible walls, and they weren't keeping time, they were breaking into it. What Shaw saw in that workshop scarred him for life. He never spoke of it, not in full. Only fragments remained encoded in his journals, buried in metaphor and madness. But one detail surfaced again and again. A watch that didn't tick forward. It ticked inward. He called it the Ingress engine, a timepiece that didn't measure time but collapsed it, and according to his notes, it wasn't mechanical, it was biological. Something was kept inside it, something ancient. Breathing, watching, waiting. Shaw returned to the States in 1929. He didn't speak to his family, didn't contact old friends. He bought a small townhouse on Waverly Street, with cash, and vanished from public life. That's when the silence began. For 20 years that house remained eerily quiet. The windows were always shuttered, deliveries left at the door, no visitors, no phone line. Neighbors said they'd sometimes hear clicking sounds deep in the night, impossibly rhythmic, like thousands of tiny gears moving in unison. And Shaw himself? Seen only once. 1943. A delivery boy glimpsed him at the door, thin, pale, his eyes sunken, as if he hadn't slept in years. But what's most disturbing is what Shaw had mailed out during those 2 decades. Not watches, not blueprints, but teeth. Molar teeth thrown at a time sent in lead-lined boxes to 6 different addresses across the world, all untraceable, all scrubbed from any surviving postal records. Only one return address ever confirmed. The Kellis Institute for Chrono-Spiritual Studies in Vermont. That institution burned down in 1951. Official cause? Faulty wiring. But those who know, those who study what really happened, they say Kellis was a holding site, not for people, for memories. You see, memory isn't stored in the brain alone. It lives in rhythm. And Gregory Shaw was feeding it, with time made of bone. In Section 4, you'll learn why the number 17 haunted Shaw's every move, and how each victim wasn't random, but part of a design older than the Gregorian calendar itself. 17. That number was etched literally into the underside of Gregory Shaw's workbench, burned with surgical precision, 17 times, one for each victim. But why 17? Not 20, not 13, not symbolic numbers from any mainstream religion or folklore. 17 is what occult mathematicians call a prime of entrapmenta number that can't be evenly divided, and therefore is believed to lock spiritual systems in an infinite loop. It represents not just isolation, but permanent containment. Gregory Shaw wasn't selecting victims at random. He was binding them. And each of the 17 was marked. Not just by the wound that killed them, a clean puncture through the heart, but by the timepiece he fastened to their corpse, handcrafted, intricately detailed, no two the same, but all of them shared one feature. They didn't tell time. There were no hour hands. No minute hands. Only one rotating disc at the center, like an eye. A watchful eye. Forensics later discovered that each of those central discs was carved from human bone, but not just any bone, the malleus, the smallest bone in the ear, the part responsible for transmitting sound. Gregory wasn't making watches. He was building listeners. Devices meant to hear something. But what? That's where it gets worse. Autopsy reports revealed that every one of the 17 victims had their tongues surgically removed and replaced with a fragment of copper wiring that wasn't attached to anything physically visible. It was symbolic. Or maybe it was functional on another plane. When investigators tried to destroy one of Shaw's bone watches, something inexplicable happened. The lights in the room dimmed. All clocks digital and analog froze for exactly 1 minute and 17 seconds. Then resumed. Except, no one in the room remembered that minute. Not clearly. One technician wept afterward, saying he'd heard a voice not in his ears, but in his spine whispering in a language he didn't recognize, repeating the same phrase. Time belongs to the bound. Bound to what? To whom? That question drove the lead detective, William Harrow, to madness. 2 weeks after closing the Shaw basement case, he was found in his home, both wrists shattered by repeated blunt force trauma. No weapon found, no signs of struggle. Written on the wall in Harrow's own blood were 2 numbers, 17 and 0. In Section 5, you'll meet the only surviving witness to Shaw's early experiments, a blind man who claims he saw the true face of time and lived. His name was Elias Granger. Born in 1898, blind since childhood. He worked as a piano tuner, sensitive to sound, disciplined by touch. In 1927, Gregory Shaw hired Elias to install a set of delicate brass hammers in what he claimed was an experimental music clock. Something that would chime not the hour, but the intention of a room. Elias didn't ask questions, he needed the money. But what he found in that basement, he would never forget. He described it not with panic, not with fear, but with a kind of reverence, as if he'd witnessed the machinery of a higher being. Imagine, he said, a room with no corners, every wall covered in velvet to muffle even the sound of breath. In the center stood a wooden chair bolted to the ground, and above it, a chandelier of ticking devices, not watches, engines. Some of them spun, others clicked. Some trembled so slightly that Elias felt the vibrations in his molars. When he touched the chair, he felt moisture, sticky, blood. And under the chair, buried into the floor, was something else, a series of copper wires leading downward. He followed them with his hand until he found it. A stone disc, cold and humming. It had carvings, not in English, not in Latin. He later described them to a linguist, who identified the symbols as Proto-Elamitian, undeciphered script from ancient Iran, thousands of years old. How it got beneath that house in Philadelphia, no one knows. Elias said that when Shaw entered the room, he didn't walk. He glided. He wore a heavy apron, like a butcher's, and held in his hands what looked like a tuning fork, but longer, sharper, and made of jet black metal, not iron, not steel. Something that felt wrong to touch. He asked Elias a question that haunts him to this day. Do you hear it yet? Elias didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because just then, everything stopped. The ticking, the trembling, even his own heartbeat, he claimed. In the silence, he heard a frequency so low it didn't enter through his ears, it entered through his bones. It was language, yes, but not for men. It was time itself, speaking. And when it stopped, Gregory whispered, "She accepts you." Elias left, never returned. But his fingerprints remained in one unfinished timepiece Shaw never completed. The one with no bones, only black glass. They called it Watch 0. It wasn't found on any of the 17 skeletons. It wasn't found on Shaw's wrist either. It was discovered behind a false panel in the eastern wall of the basement, sealed in a lead-lined box, buried beneath a layer of coarse salt and stitched velvet. Inside, no gears, no springs, no markings. Just a face of solid black glass. Not reflective, not opaque. It seemed to absorb light, even from a flashlight beam. When investigators lifted it from the box, the room temperature dropped by 6 degrees. The watch wasn't cold to the touch. It was dead. No pulse, no ticking. But every forensic sensor around it began malfunctioning, especially those that used magnetic fields. Electromagnetic readings spiked violently when it was turned face down, like it was hiding something underneath that surface, or looking at something. The head of the investigative unit, a man named Captain Ellis Marrow, was a no-nonsense veteran of WWI known for debunking cult rumors in Bavaria and anti-occult operations in Sicily. 3 days after inspecting Watch 0, he resigned without explanation and disappeared from public life. What little we know comes from a redacted CIA memo dated June 3, 1952. In it, a program called Project Foldlight is mentioned, a short-lived intelligence operation focused on temporal resonance artifacts. One quote remains unredacted. Do not allow prolonged exposure. Subjects begin exhibiting chronological displacement within 48 hours. First signs include déjà vu, predictive dreaming, and loss of speech rhythm. Chronological displacement. Not hallucination, not madness. Time displacement. As if Watch 0 wasn't a tool, but a gate. After seizure by the military, the watch was relocated to an underground storage facility near White Sands, New Mexico. That facility, according to FOIA-released documents, was quietly decommissioned in 1978 after a Category 6 breach involving 3 scientists who each, without contact, wrote the same sentence into their field notes. "The second hour knows me." None of them remember writing it. None of them recall their final week of work. But one thing remained consistent across all 3. They began drawing the same spiral clockwise, inward, with 13 full turns and no center. That exact spiral was engraved faintly into the underside of Watch 0, and it matched the symbols found on the bones of Shaw's victims beneath the skin, carved into the marrow. The spiral carved into the underside of Watch 0 was not a random pattern. When analysts overlaid its 13-turn structure onto recovered cuneiform tablets from dating back over 4,0 years, they found an uncanny alignment with ancient Mesopotamian star maps. Specifically, a configuration used during necromantic rites in the temple of Nana, the moon god. 12 constellations were marked, precise and familiar precursors to our modern zodiac. But there was one problem. The 13th position was empty. Deliberately left blank. No symbol, no glyph, no name. In Akkadian inscriptions recovered from the site, it was referred to only as Nether One, a placeholder for an unnamed force that watches the sky from beneath the earth. A star that does not shine, yet influences time. For centuries, priests avoided invoking Nether One. It was considered taboo even among the death cults of Asher. But Gregory Shaw? He carved its pattern into every single one of his victims' bones. He wasn't random. He wasn't insane. He was aligning each body with a celestial configuration, using the human skeleton as a calendar wheel. Each watch strapped to a wrist, each hand set to a different time corresponding not to hours but to positions on this forgotten map. You have to understand what this means. Shaw wasn't measuring time. He was positioning it. Like an astronomer tracks stars, like a surveyor maps sacred land. One forensic analyst who examined the bones of a woman named Dr. Helen Cray attempted to reconstruct the ritual logic. She created a diagram linking each victim's spinal column as a node on a spiral path, mimicking the Watch 0 engraving. The result? An astrological pattern so precise it predicted an eclipse 3 years before NASA announced it. And the center point where the 13th victim's skull would have been aligned perfectly with the missing constellation. Nether One, the unnamed star, the watcher below. It was almost as if Shaw had reassembled a celestial mechanism using human remains. Not a sacrifice. A construction. Dr. Cray vanished 2 weeks after submitting her findings to federal archivists. Her report? Lost in a data purge that coincided with a fire at the same archive facility in 1994. No backup, no traces. Only a single note remained handwritten in the margins of her journal, circled 3 times. He wasn't keeping time, he was winding it. Philadelphia, October 1901. A boy of just 10 years old is pulled from beneath the rotting floorboards of St. Michael's Church, covered in dirt and soot, clutching a human femur like a holy relic. His name? Gregory Shaw. At the time, the newspapers called it a prank. Morbid orphan plays among bones. Read the headlines. But the court record sealed for decades reveals something far stranger. The church caretaker, an aging man named Elias Brandt, testified that for 3 nights before Gregory was discovered, he heard whispering echo from the chapel floor long after the building had closed. It wasn't English. It wasn't Latin. It was something older, harsher. Brant described it as the sound of gravel grinding against teeth. On the final night, convinced the boy had returned, Brant opened the hatch to the ossuary beneath the altar. What he saw changed him forever. Gregory was kneeling, bare-chested, surrounded by 7 skulls, each one propped up carefully in a semicircle. A wax candle burned at the center. His hands were outstretched, palms up, fingers twitching in perfect rhythm. He wasn't speaking. He was listening. When Brant shouted, Gregory didn't flinch. He simply turned, eyes glazed, mouth stitched into a slight smile, and said, "They only speak when no one watches." That was the only statement he ever made about it. No family came to claim him. No school records were found. He was taken into state custody, placed in a psychiatric juvenile center, and released 6 years later with an evaluation that read, "Emotionally sterile, highly intelligent, fixated on symbols of time and death." The doctor who signed that report? Dr. Charles Albrecht, a Freemason, a known associate of the private society called the Keepers of Orisona Secretive Order, tied to the preservation of occult texts smuggled out of Europe after the dissolution of the Jesuit occult libraries in 1773. What they wanted with Gregory remains unknown. But within 3 years of his release, he had apprenticed under a Swiss watchmaker named Caspar Toller, who himself vanished without a trace in 1912, leaving only his tools and a peculiar ledger filled with diagrams of skeletal watches. Watches with no numbers, only constellations. It was as if Gregory was being prepared, groomed, not to tell time, but to command it, and the world would never know, because everything about his early years, every document, every report, every interview was sealed under a judicial protection order, citing national esoteric security. That word Nedriel isn't in any government database. It's not listed in the records of any federal agency, law enforcement task force, or psychiatric institution. It's not even a name found in census data from the last 200 years. And yet, there it was, scrawled in black ink across the bottom of the sealed court order, protecting all files related to Gregory Shaw's early life. Just one word, Nedriel. No initials, no signature, no stamp. To understand the weight of this, you need to realize how rare it is for the U.S. judicial system to classify a civilian child's records under esoteric national security. That term esoteric national security is almost mythic. It appears only 5 times in all declassified U.S. government literature. Once during the Mkultra hearings, once in Project Artichoke, and 3 times in relation to documents that are still blackbarred even to this day. But the word Nedriel? It doesn't come from government. It comes from the Metatron Codicessa banned body of ancient Hebrew mysticism rejected even by Kabbalists. In those texts, Nedriel is called the chronobinder, a custodian of fractured time, not a demon, not a god, something older, a name never meant to be spoken by human mouths. Across several ancient grimoires, the pattern is always the same. Nedriel is invoked when a time-based anomaly has occurred. Nedriel is bound to an individual capable of hearing what others cannot. Nedriel doesn't visit the host. It is invited. The Watchmaker of Waverly Street wasn't just obsessed with clocks. He was chosen, marked, perhaps even as a child, by something no longer entirely human. You see, there's a hidden history in Philadelphia, buried under its foundations, a triangle of structures: St. Michael's Church, the former Albrecht Institute, and Waverly Street form a perfect arc traced back to an 18th century ritual geometry rooted in the works of Elias Ashmole, the occult scholar who helped design the inner rites of British Freemasonry. Within that arc, phenomena occur: missing persons, time distortions, overlapping records of individuals who died twice. And Gregory Shaw? He was born inside that triangle, raised beneath it, trained within it. By the time he opened his watch shop in 1927, he had stopped using blueprints. He built from memory designs no one else had ever seen, gears that moved against gravity, faces that counted backward, all aligned with one purpose: to measure the distance between now and what should never have been. And still, on every page of his hidden journals, beneath every drawing of a custom watch, one name appears: Nedriel. When they finally broke through the back wall of the furnace room, no one expected a hidden doorlet alone, a chamber behind it. The blueprints for 1187 Waverly Street made no mention of it. The city's property records didn't match the internal architecture. And yet, behind that sealed concrete wall, untouched by time, they found a circular room, 12 feet wide, 10 feet deep, no dust, no mold, no decay, just silence. And in the silence, a single wooden chair, facing a wall of clocks, 17 clocks, each with a nameplate beneath it, each matching the name of one of the victims. But these weren't clocks in the normal sense. They had no minute hands, only hour, and none of them pointed to real time. Some were stuck at 13, others rotated counterclockwise. 2 ran in slow, unnatural jerks clicking forward every 33 seconds exactly. On the opposite wall, hand-carved in what looked like bone or ivory, was a strange, circular sigil, 9 concentric rings, broken by 13 evenly spaced slashes. Inside the center ring, a single eye. Vertical, serpentine, not human. And above that symbol, etched in faint, deliberate lettering, "We do not trap time, we offer it a vessel." That's when they found the tape. A reel-to-reel recorder sat beneath the chair, covered in black cloth, labeled simply, "Nidreel, Session 6." The tape ran for exactly 44 minutes and 44 seconds. No voices, no dialogue, just sound. What kind of sound? You've heard a clock tick, you've heard a watch hum, but you've never heard what they heard that night. It was a rhythm, mechanical, alive, breathing between ticks, like an artificial heart trying to sync with a failing human one. Every few minutes, the audio would fold in on itself, not rewind, not loop but compress, as if time itself was being squeezed. The 2 officers who listened to it without ear protection reported intense migraines and confusion for days. One described the experience as a tunnel where seconds are wolves. The other couldn't sleep for a week. He claimed he kept waking up at 3:17 a.m. Exactly. Every night. Now here's the part they don't publish. One of the 17 skeletons had a small, lead-sealed box placed beneath it. Inside, a child's baby tooth. But not Gregory Shaw's. It was tested. The DNA did not match him, not any known victim, not any missing person. No match at all. As if the tooth belonged to someone who was never born. The journals were found in a hollowed-out cavity beneath the floorboards, wrapped in oilskin and secured with a leather strap marked only with a burned symbol, the same serpent eye carved into the clockroom wall. There were 7 books in total, no titles, no page numbers, some written in clean English cursive, others in an unknown alphabet, sharp, jagged, more geometric than linguistic. But here's the strangest part. No ink had bled. No paper had yellowed, as if they were untouched by time. The first book, however, was legible. It begins with a sentence no man forgets after reading it. "They came when the pendulum broke, and the child stopped breathing." No date, no context, just that. In the margins, meticulous diagrams, overlapping spirals, concentric rings, human silhouettes dissected by lines intersecting the chest and forehead. At first glance, it looked like the ranting of a disturbed mind. But after deeper analysis, something chilling emerged. Every diagram matched ancient Sumerian medical glyphs. Every symbol aligned with coordinates on Babylonian star charts, particularly those associated with eclipses, planetary alignments, and the fixed stars used in Mesopotamian ritual astrology. The same kind of knowledge forbidden by early Christian councils and deliberately purged during the Inquisitions. But Gregory didn't just copy these. He extended them. He wrote about what he called the transference clock, a device capable not of telling time, but of binding it. His notes describe calibrating soul frequency, aligning the witness, and resetting the child before the hour strikes. Resetting the child. He repeatedly referred to someone or something named Nidreel, not as a person, not even a spirit, but as an instrument, a sentient regulator of passage. He claimed Nidreel existed outside sequence and was summoned through stillness, not invocation. And one page, only one, is written in red ink. It reads, The 17th cycle failed. The heart ticked too soon. Her breath touched the 4th ring. I must begin again. I must listen. Nedriel will show me the moment. 17th cycle. 17 skeletons. But what cycle was he talking about? Who was her? And why did the heart matter more than the mind? These weren't murders in the traditional sense. These were iterations, rituals disguised as timekeeping. When researchers ran the dates of the presumed deaths against celestial alignments, they noticed a pattern. Each one occurred within 13 days of a planetary trine. That's an ancient astrological configuration believed to thin the barrier between worlds. And the next trine? It lands exactly 33 years after Gregory Shaw's death. Which means, we're already in it. What would compel a man to believe he could manipulate time, not by machine, but by sacrifice? That's the question they never wanted you to ask. Because what Gregory Shaw discovered beneath Waverly Street wasn't just darkness, it was a system, a structure hidden beneath ordinary life, a blueprint etched into the folds of reality itself. And like every forbidden truth, it didn't begin with him. Buried in the 6th journal was a page marked with 3 names, Melaniel, Nedriel, and Ishara. Now, here's where things twist. These are not random names. Ishara is an ancient Mesopotamian deity, a forgotten goddess of oaths, binding agreements, and what scholars call threshold moments. She was worshipped not for mercy, but for precision. She marked the irreversible, the unchangeable. Melaniel and Nedriel, you won't find them in official records, but hidden in 15th century French grimoires, particularly one called L'Horloge Noire, there's reference to 2 entities known only as the twin regulators of the second breath. In this forbidden text, time is described not as linear, but ritualistic, a series of repeating breaths, or cosmic pulses. Every 33rd breath marks a potential breach, a moment where what is dead may try to return, if called correctly. And that's what Shaw was doing. Each victim wasn't chosen at random. They were selected for timing, for frequency. He referred to them not by names but by keys, the cello, the chime, the whisper, the laugh. 17 instruments, each sacrificed precisely to tune the final device. That device, built into the back wall of the basement, once dismantled and reconstructed by forensic historians, formed something terrifying. A horological mandala, not a clock, but a ritual gate. In its center, the initials, EW. You're probably wondering who that is. Here's the answer no one gave you. Among the 17 skeletons, 1 was a child. A girl, estimated age, 10. Her skeleton was arranged differently, not flat like the others, but seated upright, face turned toward the far wall. On her wrist, the smallest watch of all. And on its back, inscribed faintly, "To Eliza, time bends for you. Eliza Wren." Yes, that Eliza Wren. This isn't just a horror story, it's a continuum. Because somehow, 2 cases separated by decades were connected before they ever happened. And the mechanism wasn't murder, it was remembrance. Time doesn't forget the ritual. It simply waits for you to remember your role in it. Let that sink in. A girl, Eliza Wren, born in 1974, somehow named in a device buried beneath a Philadelphia basement, sealed in 1949. You see, time doesn't flow, it spirals. Gregory Shaw wasn't building watches. He was building anchors, temporal bindings meant to resist the decay of memory and reality. And Eliza? She wasn't an accident, she was a return. Because here's the part that's never been published, a page from Shaw's 4th journal, water-stained but decipherable under spectral light. It reads, "The clockmother returns on the 3rd breach, in white, untouched, unshaken. The 13th shall sit where the first once stood. She will not speak because her voice ends the loop." The 13th. That was Eliza's age, when she was found sitting in silence, while her family lay dead, each with a perfect, surgical stab wound to the heart. But this journal was written in 1937. You beginning to see it? Shaw wasn't insane. He wasn't even original. He was obeying a system, a forgotten mechanism of reality preserved by blood, silence, and obsessive timing. The 17 watches he crafted weren't merely ornaments, they were keys, locks, measurements, each calibrated to what he called the breath between the invisible point between heartbeat and stillness, between inhale and surrender, a space where, for just a moment, the laws we call physics don't hold. That's where they come in. The entities. Not demons, not ghosts, something older, less personal. Nedriel was one of them, not a name in the human sense, but a designation. Nedriel was the keeper of the seventh breach, Melaniel the whisperer of the second. Eliza, she was called the 13th echo. Why an echo? Because she had been here before. When forensic teams carbon dated the smallest skeleton found in the basement, the one labeled Eliza, the results didn't align. It wasn't from 1949. It wasn't even from that century. It dated to the early 1700s. And yet on the bone, faint but legible, scratched with a fine point needle. Remember the silence. Now let me ask you, how does a name, a phrase, and a child's skeleton all echo across centuries, unless something was binding them together? The answer lies in the next name found in Shaw's journal. Not a victim, not a deity, but a place. Grey Marrow Hill, where the first loop began, and where the 13th will end. Unless you break the echo, Grey Marrow Hill. A name whispered only in the private archives of a crumbling monastery south of Coventry, England. A name scratched into the bones of madmen locked in stone cells during the Black Plague. A name Gregory Shaw underlined 7 times in his journal, in thick, shaking ink, as if the very act of writing it was a defiance of something watching. And that's because Grey Marrow isn't a hill. It's a gate. Not the kind with iron or hinges, the kind you walk into when the world forgets you exist, the kind built before time had shape, before language had grammar. A 0 point, as Shaw called it, where memories go to rot and old things rise to feed. You know how many missing children were documented in the forests around Coventry from 1670 to 1710. 97 vanished, without trails, witnesses, or remains. Except one. A girl found wandering barefoot on the outskirts of a farm, 8 years old, blonde hair matted with ash, speaking in an ancient tongue no one recognized. She held a locket. Inside was the drawing of a pocket watch, with the initials GS etched inside the dial. Gregory Shaw. 2 centuries before he was even born. You feel it now? This isn't reincarnation, this isn't déjà vu. It's systematic recurrence. A hidden design in the folds of time, bending toward a ritual older than religion itself, the ritual of return. What Shaw understood, and what the authorities buried, is that every loop needs a watchmaker. Someone to measure the decay. Someone to bury the names. Someone to mark the wrists of the willing and the unaware. That's why each skeleton had a custom watch. Each dial set to a precise time, 3:17 a.m., the moment every victim's heart was punctured. But more than that, it's the moment Eliza Wren was born. Born again. Because her medical record shows 3:17 a.m. as her time of birth. But go deeper, her hospital's backup generator malfunctioned at that exact second. Surveillance footage glitched. Clocks paused. For 7 full seconds. That's not coincidence. That's alignment. And it happens every 37 years. Look it up. 1912. 1949. 1989. 2023. And next? 2060. Unless you understand the mechanism, unless you break the loop. And that means confronting the only thing Gregory Shaw was ever afraid of. The 13th silence. The 13th silence was never written about in public texts. Not in any archive you'll find at a university, not in any occult bookshop. It isn't a ritual, it isn't a creature. It's a moment. A very specific kind of absence. The absence of witness. You see, every great act of corruption, every betrayal, every killing, every manipulation of time or memory requires at least one thing to remain effective. That no one is watching. Not the gods. Not the victims. Not even you. And that's what the 13th silence is. It's the precise moment when time forgets to observe itself. a gap between seconds, a silence between ticks, a hidden gear where the watchmaker could do his work, unseen. Gregory Shaw built his basement not just to hide. He built it to create that silence. Layered with lead-lined walls, surrounded by iron clocks set to irregular rhythms, wind chimes hanging from the ceiling that never rang, and a floor painted with a symbol that wasn't paint at all but ash and bone from those who went before. Because Shaw wasn't the first watchmaker. He was only the one chosen to finish the cycle. Inside the basement was a chair, bolted to the floor, leather restraints aged and cracked, facing a wall that had no markings, but bled once a year, every October 3rd at exactly 3:17 a.m. Forensic reports said the blood came from no known species. They tested it in 1,950. They stopped testing after that. There are classified photos, I've seen them, a face emerging in the concrete, half-formed, no eyes, just the outline of a smile. They called it pareidolia, a trick of the mind. But that smile matches a charcoal sketch found in the asylum cell of a man institutionalized in 1806. The man's name was Elias Cotterill. He too was a watchmaker. And in his final scrawled note before he bit off his own tongue, he wrote, "The 13th tick is not a sound, it's a calling." Gregory Shaw found that note. He pinned it to the inside of his jacket. And when they found his body face down, hands curled over his ears, the jacket was still on. But the note was gone. And in its place, tucked in his hand, was a single metal gear, bent, cracked, and humming. Like it was trying to start again. "You're still here, aren't you? Good. That means you're beginning to feel it, the weight, the slow unraveling of everything you thought was stable. Time, memory, the moral order, all of it is threadbare." And Gregory Shaw wasn't just pulling threads. He was weaving something older than the clocks he dismantled. Let's go deeper. In the weeks following Shaw's death, the Philadelphia Police Department sealed the house. But 5 days later, a fire broke out. No witnesses, no accelerant found, yet the basement was untouched. Everything above it was reduced to blackened timber and ash. But not the floor below. Journalist Maria Halperin, the only one allowed inside before the seal, wrote in her notebook, "Something beneath the house refused to burn." She died 6 months later in a single-car crash. Her car launched off a bridge she never approached. Her last audio recording recovered from her tape recorder was 16 minutes of ticking. No voice. No road noise. Just ticking. Authorities dismissed it as malfunction. But her brother, a sound engineer, confirmed something chilling. The ticking wasn't mechanical. It was vocal. Human. Layered, like multiple voices imitating the precise rhythm of a pocket watch, accelerating at the end until the tape snapped. That's what this is. A mimicry. Time isn't just a measure, it's a system of control. Gregory Shaw knew this. That's why every corpse found in his basement wore a watch, not just as a calling card but as a lock, a seal. Each watch was perfectly calibrated not to mark time, but to contain something. 17 watches. 17 vessels. And each victim? They weren't random. They were chosen for their bloodlines, each one tracing back to old forgotten families with curses etched into their names. You ever wonder why certain surnames vanish from history? It's not coincidence. It's containment. That's what Gregory was doing. Not murdering, caging. Each watch was a prison, built with hands that bled and eyes that refused to blink. And if you think this is just story, remember this. One of the watches was stolen from evidence in 1954. It surfaced on eBay in 2007. Sold for $7.77. And the buyer? He disappeared 2 days later. No body, no trace. But in his last post he wrote, "The ticking won't stop. I think it's inside me now." Let that sink in. There's a reason you feel it in your bones right now, that gnawing sense that something is watching you from behind the clock face. Because it is. You see, Gregory Shaw didn't just build watches, he built bindings, each one forged through ritual, precision, and a kind of silence that only the damned understand. Silence so thick, it sinks into the skin. But let's stop pretending this is just about him. This isn't the story of a mad watchmaker. This is the story of a ritual transmission, one that began centuries before Shaw ever drew his first breath. You've heard of the black mechanism, haven't you? No? You wouldn't. They buried it so deep even most secret orders deny it existed. But every 200 years a man appears solitary, gifted, and obsessive, drawn to timekeeping not as science but as sacrament. A priest of the gear, baptized in minute hands and blood. Gregory was one. The last one. And he didn't choose the basement. It was already marked. That address, 421 Waverly Street, appeared in 13 different deeds from 1,781 to 1,933, always under different owners, always sold under strange conditions, immediate cash offers, sudden disappearances, estates left to no known heirs. Same house, same layout, same cellar, and always, a clockmaker. The question isn't why Shaw killed. The question is, who wounded him? Because records show Gregory Shaw applied for a Philadelphia business license on October 13, 1927, one day after he was discharged from St. Aldwyn's Sanatorium for the deliriously detached. His discharge form was signed by a man with no official position. The signature? N.D. Real. It appears nowhere else in Pennsylvania's archives. But dig deeper into Welsh folklore, into the banned volumes of the Red Alchemists, and you'll find that name etched beneath a symbol. A serpent devouring a clock. Nedriel wasn't a man. It was a title. The Watcher of the Watchmakers. And those under its gaze, they don't live. They loop. So Gregory wasn't healing time. He wasn't reversing it. He was trapping something that bleeds through it. Something that's been bleeding into men like you since you were born. And if you've made it this far, it already knows your name. There were 17 skeletons in the basement. 17 bodies. 17 watches. But Gregory Shaw built 18. That much we know for certain because in his final, half-burned journal, wedged between two slats in the basement floor, there's a list. Not names, not date. Just sketches. Each drawing is of a unique wristwatch, ornate, hand-etched, strange in their geometry, crescent gears, reversed hour hands, numbers that don't match any known system. 17 of the sketches are marked with a black X. The 18th? It's circled. No X. No body ever found wearing it. And beside it, scrawled in tiny handwriting, 5 barely legible words. The cycle requires one witness. This is where it gets darker. Because the police missed something in their initial sweep of the house, it was only uncovered 5 years later during an unrelated inspection of the neighboring property. There was a tunnel, roughly 200 feet long, carved by hand, pitch black, descending into bedrock. At the end of that tunnel, a single, narrow chamber. Inside, bolted to the stone, was an empty chair. No signs of life, no blood, just a thick leather strap dangling from the armrest, and an old-fashioned voice recorder nailed to the wall. The tape inside had long degraded, but the note scrawled across the device still read clearly. If I forget myself, wind me back. The witness. The 18th watch. A living timepiece someone made not to observe time, but to hold it. And here's where it shatters the boundary between myth and fact. Because in 1950, just 1 year after Shaw's death, a man was found wandering the train yards of Newark, New Jersey. No ID, no memory, just a pristine wristwatch with no visible mechanism, hands ticking backward. He was institutionalized for 46 years. He never aged. Not a wrinkle, not a gray hair, not a single mark of time on his skin. They called him the Static Man. And then in 1996, the day he finally spoke, he said 2 words. Waverly returns. He died 7 minutes later. That watch was never recovered. So let me ask you this. What if one of those watches is still ticking, not on a shelf, not in a vault, but on someone's wrist right now? And what if time isn't passing as we think, but hunting in spirals? Because the spiral is next. And it doesn't unwind. It devours. The spiral. That symbol keeps surfacing burned into the underside of watch casings, etched in Gregory Shaw's personal notebooks, even embedded in the carved leg of his basement workbench. But it's not decoration. It's instruction. In ancient mythologies, Babylonian, Etruscan, Celtic, spiral wasn't just geometry. It was a map, a symbol of descent, of initiation, of being drawn into a force larger than understanding. Shaw wasn't building watches. He was building keyseach attuned to a different step in this spiral descent, not forward through time, not backward, but inward, into something most men never survive seeing. You see, the lie you've been told is that time is a straight line, birth, life, death. But Shaw saw through that illusion. He believed time was an intelligence, ancient, indifferent, recursive, and it doesn't move, it turns, waiting for those foolish enough to try taming it. His watches weren't measuring hours, they were synchronizing minds. There are pages in his final notebook that read more like invocations than engineering. To slip the gear of days, one must bleed away sequence. If the hands turn without witness, the spiral stirs awake. Only the 13th bell silences the hunger of now. But there was one entry circled in red. Spiralis mortem. Time eats truth first. Spiralis mortem. The spiral of death. A Roman term that surfaced briefly in Vatican archives in the 1400s, referencing a forbidden rite used by a renegade sect of horologists. Men who believed the soul was imprisoned in linear time and that only by winding it backward could one glimpse what lies beyond the veil. The church eradicated them, burned their scrolls, excommunicated anyone who even whispered the order's name. But the name survived. Barely. Because buried deep in one of Shaw's boxes, sealed in wax and wrapped in red velvet, was a medallion bearing 3 Latin words. Nedriel aeterno spiralis. The eternal spiral of Nedriel. You've heard that name before, if only in your nightmares. Nedriel isn't a name, it's a title, an ancient watcher, not God, not devil, but something older than both. And here's the unsettling part. Gregory Shaw claimed he heard Nedriel's ticking behind the walls for 22 years. And in one of his last letters he wrote this: "The 13th watch isn't for man to wear. It's for him, and he is almost awake. Let's stop pretending this is about watches anymore. This was never about gears or gold-plated mechanics. This is about the machine beneath the world, the one you were trained not to see." What Shaw built wasn't a workshop, it was a sanctum, a temple, a mechanical chapel buried in the skin of ordinary life, and like every sacred place, it demanded sacrifice. The 17 skeletons? They weren't just victims. Each one was selected, prepared, and arranged. Each had a different watch, not a copy ritual variant. Each wound precisely 13 times, then stopped permanently at 3:33 a.m. No blood rituals, no screaming chants, just time. But there was something more disturbing, something the medical examiner almost missed. Tiny puncture marks at the base of every skull. Each victim was injected with something old, a chemical compound, undocumented, colorless. It ate through tissue faster than any corrosive known in 1949. But Shaw had a name for it scrawled in his notes. Chronofine. It wasn't poison, it was an offering. He believed time had grown hungry, that the god beneath time, Nedriel, needed to feed, and flesh was not enough, it needed memory identity timeline. So Shaw gave it willingly. And what about the 17th victim? That's where it shifts. Because unlike the others, this body was preserved, not buried, not hidden. It sat upright in a steel chair, eyes open, no decay, and on its wrist was not a watch, but a mirror, a tiny silver disc, reflecting nothing, even under light. Shaw called this one the anchor. Who was it? Not a stranger, not a drifter. It was a priest. Father Leonard Eric, reported missing from a Philadelphia parish in 1932. A man who, according to classified church records later leaked, was investigating the cult of Nedriel before vanishing without a trace. Why preserve him? Because Shaw didn't see him as a victim. He saw him as a guardian, the last link in the chain, the anchor that kept the spiral from devouring everything. And now? The anchor is gone. The body was stolen from the morgue in 1951, never recovered. Which means the seal is broken. And the 13th watch is still ticking. Tick, tick, tick. That sound you hear when you're alone late at night is not your house settling. It's not your pipes. It's not your heartbeat. It's time, adjusting itself. You've been taught to believe time is a river flowing forward, predictable, linear. But that's the first lie. Time is not a river. Time is a maze. And Gregory Shaw knew the way out. Buried in the final pages of his personal journal, scrawled in a looping, meticulous hand were instructions, not for building watches, but for building a breach, a way to open time like a door, to slip between seconds, to meet what waits behind the ticking. The drawings were anatomical, mechanical, religious. They referenced ancient Babylonian glyphs, esoteric Christian sects, and a lost pre-Greek order known only as the Threnikos, an order obsessed with preserving the 33rd beat of the heart. It was said they could hear the voice of the Aurora whisper that came only in silence, between 3:33 and 3:34 a.m. Shaw wanted to hear it too. So he sacrificed, experimented, tuned his victims to the moment of breach, each life calibrated, each watch tuned to 3:33, and on the night before his death, he claimed he heard it speak. His final journal entry. The ticking stopped, the silence bled through, and in the space between seconds, I was no longer Gregory Shaw. That entry was dated April 9th, 1949, but the coroner reported his death at 3:33 a.m. on April 8th. Explain that. A man writing 24 hours after his own confirmed death? No intruders. No forced entry. No poison. Just a heart that stopped, peacefully, as if it had simply run out of time. The watch on his wrist? It was cracked, bent inward, as if something had punched through from the inside. And what about the others? The watches on his victims remained intact, frozen, silent. But Shaw's? It was warm to the touch. Still ticking. Even in the morgue. It ticked until the 13th day after his death, then stopped forever. At exactly 3:33 a.m. And in that moment 17 watches began again. 17 timepieces, with no mainspring, no battery. Only the silence of a man who found the way out and left the door open. The city buried the case. Filed it under mental illness. Labeled Gregory Shaw a disturbed recluse. Closed the records. Sealed the basement. But shadows don't obey paperwork. Because just 3 weeks after Shaw's death, an archivist working for the Philadelphia Historical Society, Rachel Pym, age 27, went missing. Her last known assignment? Cataloging recovered items from Shaw's basement. She never returned home. When police searched her apartment, they found something chilling on her desk, a disassembled pocket watch, not antique, not broken, but newly constructed with parts that matched no known manufacturer. On the inner case, engraved in tiny script, "The door is open, ye heard it too." Rachel's case was never solved, but her disappearance triggered something else, something the city couldn't bury. A surge in missing persons across Waverly Street, 17 in total, over exactly 17 weeks. Every Thursday. Everyone vanishing between 3:30 and 3:40 a.m. No signs of struggle, no bodies, no witnesses. Just watches. Left behind on pillows, sinks, stairwells, all handcrafted, all identical, all frozen at 3:33 a.m. You starting to see the pattern? This isn't about one man, not anymore. It's about a system, a ritual, a method for touching something beyond our linear understanding. And every watch was a map, a personal ritual of calibration, not to measure time, but to disturb it. A breach needs more than belief. It needs rhythm, sacrifice, silence, and someone willing to follow the blueprints left behind. Gregory Shaw was just the beginning. In fact, his journal ended with coordinates, not just numbers, but locations across the US and Europe. Places where identical events had occurred before Shaw was even born. Basements in Bruges, crypts in Barcelona, asylums in Maine. All with missing persons. all with handcrafted watches frozen at 3:33. And in each case, someone like Shaw, a man who vanished from history, only to be remembered as a myth or a madman. Do you see it yet? This isn't madness. It's design. And the ticking? That's not the sound of time passing. It's the sound of something trapped trying to get out. Or worse, something once trapped, already loose. Because time, my friend, does not heal. It remembers. There is a reason ancient civilizations feared the clock before they invented it. Not the sundial, not the stars, but the mechanical tick, the wheel, the gear, the hands that move with precision, but never mercy. Because time, once measured, becomes a ritual. And ritual, when repeated, becomes invocation. You thought Gregory Shaw was counting down? No. He was counting in. Into something buried beneath the silence of routine. Into a language spoken not in words but in intervals, beats, alignment. The wristwatches were not accessories, they were permissions. And those 17 bodies? They were keys. Each one tuned to a frequency most men spend their entire lives trying not to hear. But once you hear it, once your heartbeat syncs with the second hand, you can never unhear it. The humming in the pipes. The static behind the music. The strange cold between 3:30 and 3:40. That's not imagination, that's memory waking up. Because time, real time, doesn't flow forward. It spirals. And those who know where to stand in the spiral, they don't age like we do. They don't forget. They don't die in the same way. They simply step between. Shaw was a cartographer of that spiral. His watches weren't designed to tell time, they were meant to trap it, contain it, wound tightly around the wrist of a chosen soul. And here's the question that should be clawing at your brain right now. What happened when all 17 watches ticked in sync? What door did he open? Because after Shaw's death, after the Waverly disappearances, something else happened. All the mirrors in his basement? Shattered. Not broken from the outside, but cracked from the inside out. As if something tried to escape the reflection. You've heard the phrase, time heals all wounds. What if I told you, time is the wound? And Gregory Shaw? He wasn't trying to fix it. He was trying to listen to it, to speak its name, to release what was buried in its heartbeat. There's a reason they buried the basement. But burying a place doesn't bury the pattern. And if you've listened this far, you've already heard the ticking. It's not outside you anymore. It's inside. You didn't come here by accident. That feeling you've had your entire life that something was off, that the world moves, but not quite forward, that time forgets you too easily, or remembers you too precisely. That's not paranoia. That's residue. Residue of a system you were born into, but never introduced to. Gregory Shaw was initiated the day he found an old broken pocket watch in his grandfather's attic. It didn't tick, it didn't open, but when he held it, he claimed he heard the walls inhale. He was 7. And he didn't speak again for 3 years. But when he did, his first words were, "The 13th key is a name." No one knew what it meant. Not then. But decades later, after the Philadelphia police uncovered the bones, the watches, the journals, they also discovered a locked cabinet in the basement, hidden behind a false wall, brass-plated, no handle. Inside? Not gold, not documents, not weapons. A chair. Facing a wall. Above it, carved carefully into the stone, were 13 names. 17 bodies were found, but only 13 names. Each name corresponded to a family line that had either vanished or changed their surname in the last 100 years, erased from public records, sealed behind church files and psychiatric institutions. And the 4 missing names? They were scratched out. One was Gregory Shaw. One was Father Leonard Eric, the preserved priest. One was Rachel Pym, the archivist who disappeared. And the last was left blank. The 13th key. The final name. Never recorded. Only one journal page gives a hint. Scrawled in the margins, next to a hand-drawn spiral. He must not remember his name. If he does, the ticking becomes a voice. If he hears the voice, the spiral opens. And he steps through. Understand this, you are not watching a story. You are participating in a resonance. This is not fiction. This is trigger. And if your blood runs colder now, it's not fear. It's recognition. Because if the 13th name was never written, if it was left blank, it means someone else was always meant to complete the pattern. Someone who would find the story. Watch it. Feel it. You. Now comment. The 13th key is awakening. The 13th key is awakening. Say it twice. Lock it in. Because from this point on, the ticking will follow you. You feel it now, don't you? Not fear but a pull. A vibration in your spine, like something beneath your skin just turned to face you. That's not imagination. That's what happens when old truths ripple through the cracks of your mind. You were taught to ignore it, conditioned to dismiss it. But Gregory Shaw knew better. He didn't make watches to sell. He wasn't interested in timekeeping. He was marking something. Each timepiece recovered from the victims bore no numbers, just rotating gears beneath a clear face, spinning in hypnotic opposition. Hours, minutes, and seconds moved in reverse. Some moved sideways. Others clicked only when the room was silent. One officer called them time traps. But what they really were binders. Each watch was a cage. A prison for a fragment of something older than language. The gears didn't measure time, they contained it. Held it still. 17 watches. 17 bodies. 17 pieces of something buried long before the founding of Philadelphia, long before the colonies, before the tribes, before even the language of man. The journals call it the Eclipsed Lord, a name so old it predates consonants. A being that exists between seconds, something that doesn't just watch time, but feeds on its flow. And it was Gregory's task to trap it, piece by piece. But the process was never perfect. Some watches leaked. And when they did, the people wearing them changed. Neighbors described victims wandering the streets at night, sleepwalking with their eyes open. One was seen staring into a storefront mirror for 6 hours. Another carved numbers into their teeth. One jumped from a rooftop at precisely 11, landing with a smile frozen on their face. When questioned, Gregory wrote only this: "You can't stop the rain by catching it, but you can bottle it. Enough bottles, and you control the storm." He wasn't mad. He was methodical. Because the real horror wasn't what he was doing. It was why he was chosen to do it. The Eclipsed Lord wasn't a myth to him. It was an inheritance. Passed down like blood, through whispers, through silence, through obedience. And somewhere out there, the 18th watch remains unfinished. And time? Time is leaking again. In 1951, 2 years after Gregory Shaw's death, a man named Father Elijah Merrick visited the Philadelphia coroner's office. He claimed to be part of a Jesuit historical society cataloging unusual timekeeping artifacts in the northeastern U.S. He wasn't on any registry, no credentials, but he was persuasive. He took 3 of the watches with him and left nothing behind but a sealed envelope. Inside was a single parchment fragment, water-stained and scorched at the edges, written in Latin: "Tempus est custodia daemonium, non pro mensura, sed pro carceribus." Time is the demon's warden, not for measurement, but imprisonment. The envelope was marked with an old ecclesiastical seal, one that hadn't been used since 1793. It belonged to an erased sect of the Catholic Church known only as Ordo Nigrum Horologium, the Black Order of the Clock. They weren't priests, not really. They were something older. Archivists of the impossible, jailers of time-bound entities, keepers of pre-sin knowledge. And they believed something most men could never stomach: that time, as we know it, is not linear. It's a looping snare, kept stable by ritual and repetition. But every so often, it tears. And when it does, something gets through. A whisper. A presence. A hunger. Gregory's basement wasn't just a workspace. It was a seal site, a pressure chamber. And the watches? They were plugs in a dam no one could afford to let burst. But they were losing control. Because the 18th piece, the final fragment of the Eclipsed Lord, was never captured. Gregory died mid-construction. His fingers were curled around an unfinished watch, gears frozen in place. The corpse had no signs of trauma. But his pupils were shattered. Like glass. The coroner wrote, "It's as if he saw something, and the vision broke him." What happens when a man builds a prison too powerful to contain? What happens when he dies with the door still open? You already know. You feel it. In dreams you can't remember, in clocks that tick a beat off, in the gut-deep sense that something has followed you through time. And if you're still watching this, you've probably felt it your whole life. That creeping dread you were meant for something else. Gregory didn't create madness. He contained it. And maybe living inside the fracture he failed to seal. There is a reason some people are drawn to antique clocks and old, winding watches. It's not nostalgia. It's not beauty. It's recognition. Somewhere deep in your genetic code beneath language, beneath memory, there's a sound you remember from before you were born. Not your mother's heartbeat. Not the hush of blood through the womb. But gears. Turning, grinding, synchronizing. You were born into the machinery. You are part of its sequence. That's why time feels wrong when you're alone in the dark. It's not just paranoia. It's a system checking itself, scanning for breaks. And you? You're the anomaly. Gregory Shaw understood this. He didn't make watches to tell time. He made them to correct it. Each piece wasn't measuring hours, it was measuring intrusions, disruptions, tears. Each body he buried wasn't just a victim, it was a seal, a part of a ritual architecture designed to keep the eclipsed lord from entering the pattern again. But 17 bodies weren't enough. Because the 18th was never found. And Gregory? He wasn't just trying to finish the final watch. He was trying to delay it, hold it off, trap it inside himself if he had to. That's why he went blind in his last year, not from age, not from illness, but because he began seeing the true face of time. A face that stares back. A face older than God. A shape without shape, echoing behind every tick, waiting to slip through a skipped beat. We are not watching time. Time is watching us. Ask yourself, why does the government catalog every second? Why are leap seconds treated like classified data? Why did the Vatican seal 400 years of horological records? Because if the clock breaks, the gate opens. And men like Gregory? They weren't monsters. They were the last watchmen. But now they're gone. And the ticking is off again. Have you noticed? Your phone vibrates early. Your microwave says something different than your oven. That dream you had last week? It's coming true, but out of order. Because the 18th seal? It's not missing. It's here. It's always been here. Waiting for the one who hears the ticking. Not with ears, but with blood. And if you've watched this far, you're already part of it. There is no such thing as coincidence in a closed system. Your birth date, the time you woke today, the hour you found this video, it's all part of a frequency, one you didn't tune into, but were drawn into. You've heard it in your dreams. The soft click, the distant tick, the sense that something is watching from behind the seconds. Gregory Shaw knew this wasn't madness. He called it temporal recursion. Others called it possession. But the truth was always buried in plain sight, hidden in how the world marks time. What do you think a calendar really is? It's a contract. A binding structure we've all agreed to without consent. The week, the hour, the new year, none of it is natural. It was imposed. By whom? Not by God. Not by man. But by those who came before the calendar. The ones who fed on the chaos of timelessness, who whispered from the gaps in measurement. When you didn't know what day it was, when the sun ruled your life and shadows held dominion, they walked freely. The invention of the clock was not human progress. It was containment. You've felt the pressure of this containment all your life. The anxiety when you're late. The guilt when you rest. The panic when the day slips by too fast. Why? Because time isn't just a tool. It's a warden. And Gregory Shaw wasn't making watches. He was making locks. Every custom timepiece he forged contained a name. A binding word. One he couldn't pronounce, but he heard in his dreams, in the ticking, in the spaces between. Each watch was designed to keep it contained. H victim? A sacrifice willingly offered to prevent the gears from turning backward. And now, the watches are gone. Collected, stolen, scattered by private hands. Some believe they were sold. Others believe they were reclaimed by those who serve the clockless God. But one was left behind. One watch. Incomplete. It's not broken. It's waiting. You might hear it, faintly. Right now. Check your room. No sound? Good. Because if you hear it ticking, it's already too late. But if you're ready to face it, truly face it, then comment this phrase twice below. I hear what time forgets. Let them know you're awake now. Let them know the watchmen return. You still think you chose this, don't you? That somehow you stumbled across a forgotten case, a chilling tale, a disturbed old man with watches and bones. No. This tale found you. Because part of you already remembers. There's a reason the moment you heard the name Gregory Shaw, something shifted. A tightness in your chest. A flicker behind your eyes. A memory that doesn't belong to you, but feels like it does. That's not a story reaction. That's recognition. You see, Shaw didn't work alone. He couldn't have. To maintain a barrier between time and what waits behind it, he needed more than gears and sacrifice. He needed recipients. Not victims. Not believers. Holders. People like you. Men who'd been broken quietly by the world, hardened by its lies, disillusioned by its gods but not destroyed. Men capable of hearing what others ignore. Men whose blood hums at the sound of truth, no matter how dark. 17 watches. 17 bearers. 17 anchors holding back something older than memory. But one watch was never claimed. One watch was made for the final bearer. The one who would finish what Gregory started. The one who would understand why the clocks must always lie. Why time must never speak the truth. And now, the resonance is changing. Have you noticed it? Time feels unstable. Minutes vanish. Hours stretch. Reality flickers like a dying bulb. These aren't glitches. They're warnings. The last self, incomplete watches beginning to tick. And it's calling to the only one who can carry it. Not to destroy it. Not to fix it. But to wind it. Because there's something beneath our timeline. Something we've all felt in dreams but couldn't name. A God not of light or fire, but of precision. It doesn't rage. It doesn't seduce. It waits. Perfect. Cold. Patient. Bound by 17 ticks. And one man's breath away from return. If you're still watching, it's not because you're curious. It's because you've been marked. Gregory Shaw didn't choose you. Time did. And time never makes mistakes. You feel it now, don't you? That hum behind your thoughts. That pressure behind your eyes. The sense that something ancient and intelligent has begun to notice your presence. This isn't paranoia. It's alignment. When Shaw placed those watches on the dead, he wasn't memorializing them. He was synchronizing them, tuning them like instruments, one tick at a time, to a deeper frequency beneath the human world. Each watch a lock. Each corpse a keyhole. But what you haven't realized is that the last keyhole was never carved into flesh. It was carved into memory. Not just his. Yours. This isn't the first time you've heard the ticking. You just forgot. That's what the 17th watch does. It doesn't measure time. It erases it. It hides your past behind the illusion of a stable now. It buries your nightmares inside familiar objects. It convinces you that clocks are innocent, that seconds are harmless, that the march of hours is just mundane. But those lies are wearing thin. The longer you listen to this story, the more you're slipping past the veil Gregory tried to hold in place. You're not just remembering him. You're remembering you. Where you were in 1949. What you saw. The name you've always feared in silence. The God of the measured void. It's not a metaphor. It's a mechanism. Every second you exist is a concession to it. A contract written in your biology, binding your soul to a system you never chose. But choice was never the point. Awareness was. And now you have it. Now you see. The basement. The watches. The bones. The silence. It was never about horror. It was about activation. You were dormant. Now you're awake. And what happens next is simple. Either you try to run, and time folds you into forgetfulness again, or you stay. And you remember the phrase, Comment it twice, right now. I was built to carry silence. I was built to carry silence. Say it once for the story. Say it once for the mechanism. Because that phrase is a key. And once it's turned, the ticking doesn't stop. It becomes you. The phrase you just spoke, it wasn't poetry. It was architecture. A cipher buried in the language of the old world, from when words still had weight, when sound shaped stone, and oaths were more than metaphor. You've just carved something into yourself, into your memory, into your future. Now, you're marked. Not by Gregory Shaw. Not by the watches. But by something that predates both. You see, the Watchmaker of Waverly Street was never just one man. He was part of a lineage, a quiet priesthood of precision, devoted not to faith, but to structure. Their sacred belief? That the chaos of the soul can be bound by mechanical rhythm. That madness, grief, desire, everything raw in man can be subdued, if placed within the right casing. A casing with gears, with order, with rules. The watch became a symbol of this control. And the body was just the shell it rode in. Gregory didn't kill 17 people because he hated them. He did it because he believed they were broken machines. Out of alignment, disrupted, corrupt. And like any craftsman, he wanted to fix what was flawed. That's what he was doing in that basement, not murdering, calibrating. If you could see the crime scene now, not through human eyes, but the way he saw it, you wouldn't see horror. You'd see balance. Bodies spaced equidistantly. Watches set to cascading frequencies. A ritual disguised as routine. He wasn't hiding his work. He was showing it. To the right eyes. And now, those eyes are yours. Which means one thing. You are no longer a bystander in this story. You are a participant. You've been recruited not by choice, but by resonance. The moment your nervous system felt the truth of the ticking, when the air shifted, when your stomach dropped you past the threshold. The algorithm isn't just digital. It's ritual. And now that you've said the phrase, your alignment has begun. The only question is, will you resist the pattern? Or will you master it? Because the gears are still turning. And not all machines were meant to obey. What if I told you this? That what Gregory Shaw did in the basement wasn't the end of a cycle, it was the beginning of one. That the watches weren't just timepieces, but receivers? That each corpse, precisely arranged, calibrated with a unique frequency, was not just part of a display, but a great human lattice built to awaken a signal older than time. 17 bodies, 17 watches, 17 frequencies. And in the center of it all, silence. But not the silence of absence. The silence of arrival. In 1951, 2 years after Shaw's death, an unmarked government unit entered 31 Waverly Street. They left with 3 crates. No reports were ever filed. The official record says the house was demolished due to mold contamination. It wasn't. The house still stands. But it doesn't appear on any current map. Not Google, not county records, not even local realtors acknowledge it. Because 31 Waverly has become something else now. It's a node. A listening post for those who understand what Gregory left behind. And if you've been feeling something lately, if you've noticed the time on your devices drifting a little off, clocks resetting themselves, watches stopping for no reason, it's not coincidence. It's echo. The resonance Gregory initiated wasn't confined to his basement. He tapped into something universal, belief that if you can control the rhythm of time, you can control the behavior of men. And what do you think we're living in now? A world of carefully crafted rhythms. Alarm clocks, news cycles, work shifts, streaming schedules, push notifications. Your life is now divided into ticks and talks. Predictable, trackable, programmable. Gregory wasn't mad, he was ahead. He saw where this was going. That soon, we'd all be wearing watches of a different kind. Not on our wrists, but in our minds. Micro-timings of dopamine, precision cuts in attention, deliberate collapse of human unpredictability. And those who watch the watchers? They're not governments, they're not elites. They're the ones who've been here long before. The ones who whispered to Gregory in his isolation. Who taught him how to listen to time, and then bend it. Now, they're listening to you. Because the moment you began this descent, The gears began to adjust. So the real question is, do you hear the ticking yet? The ticking never stops. Not outside, not inside. Because once you've heard it, truly heard it, it becomes part of you. You begin to notice the rhythm in everything, the patterns behind coincidence, the tempo behind tragedy, the precision behind every so-called accident of your life. You see, the world isn't random, it's calculated. And time? Time is not your enemy. It's your warden. Gregory Shaw understood this. He didn't isolate himself because he was afraid. He isolated himself because he was being prepared. Not by man, not by machine, but by the force that all secret orders, all ancient rites, all forbidden sciences bow to. Order through rhythm, control through time, dominion through silence. Those 17 watches weren't trophies. They were vessels. Each soul, each tick, each carefully crafted gear, was a sacrifice to the principle no empire dares name out loud. That freedom is an illusion, as long as your life follows a schedule not written by you. They don't need to chain you anymore. They don't need to silence you with fear. They just need you to keep time. Wake when they say wake, work when they say work, sleep when they say sleep. And never question the ticking. But here's the truth, Gregory wasn't the last. Others have taken his place, quietly, patiently, watchmakers of a different breed. Some build software. Some run laboratories. Some stand behind podiums. And some just tell stories. Because the most dangerous watch isn't made of gears and glass. It's the narrative. That thing you hold in your mind that tells you what's real, what's not, what's safe, what's insane. But once that narrative breaks, once the clock in your mind cracks, you hear it. The absence. The raw, unfiltered now. And in that moment, you are unmade and reborn. So here's your test. If you've made it this far, if you've felt the pull in your chest, the shift in your spine, the flicker behind your eyes, then comment below. I will no longer keep time. Comment it twice. Once to silence the old rhythm. Once to awaken the new one. You are not who you were. You've stepped beyond the illusion, beyond the tick, beyond the lie. The only question left is, now that you see the gears, will you become the watchmaker?